Their names are etched in the Algerian desert that claimed their lives. Once a temporary place of work for them, now a permanent place of remembrance. In London, in a place dedicated to justice, they are remembered too. Within these walls, their final days reconstructed. Their families drawn here by their common loss and the desire to simply know. An inquest here has been looking at how such a brazen attack could happen. It's taken weeks and volumes of evidence given by dozens of witnesses. Those witnesses reveal details about the attack never before heard in public, testimony collated into a huge volume of transcripts. On the record now are some of the words exchanged between British Petroleum executive Andrew Collins and one of the Canadian militants. By recounting some of their chilling conversations, Collins provides new insight into the attack and into the young man from London, Ontario they took to calling the Canadian terrorist. Early morning on January 16, 2013. A convoy of vehicles force their way through the gates of the In Amenas gas plant, and well-armed militants make their presence known. In London, BP executive Andrew Collins wakes up to the news that In Amenas was under attack. Collins heads to BP's offices in Sunbury, where managers have gone into crisis mode. Staff in Algeria are now getting in touch to say the gunmen are raging through the premises. They were in fact searching for foreigners, rounding them up and bringing them to a central courtyard. Among the militants there, a blonde, fluent English speaker. For the foreign hostages, he is a bewildering sight. In London, a phone call to BP executive Collins comes through and he picks up. But it is not a voice he knows, confident, firm, and with a North American accent. "Is that Andy?" the voice asks. "Yes," says Collins. "This is Al-Qaeda. We've taken hostages at In Amenas. We want to talk to the presidents of your companies." It was the first of a series of calls Collins would receive in the coming hours. Calls he would later learn came from the Canadian militant, Xris Katsiroubas. We know from survivors Katsiroubas acted as translator, negotiator, and cold-hearted fighter. These images of him were captured then by Algerian workers on the scene, while he calmly and expertly set up explosives. The CBC has now obtained a never-before-seen photo, captured by a hostage on his cell phone and emailed to his wife back in the UK. It shows Katsiroubas on the phone in his role as negotiator. Later in the morning, Katsiroubas calls twice to make one key demand. By then, the Algerian military had deployed helicopters to monitor the scene. Katsiroubas insists the military must back off.
About the kidnappers themselves, Saeed, who are they?
Mostly the leader of the kidnappers is a former Algerian terrorist who's been operating in the Sahara. He born and grew up in the desert, Algerian Sahara desert.
An hour later, the military hadn't budged. So Katsiroubas tries another approach. He calls again and puts one of the hostages on the phone. The hostage describes the terrifying reality. The explosives strung around their necks. The number of armed men. In London, where the calls are now being recorded, Collins' phone rings once again. CBC repeatedly requested those recordings and to speak with Collins, to no avail. Still, during his testimony, Collins quoted transcripts of the calls, providing the first detailed public glimpse into the extensive contact with the hostage takers. in particular the role of Canadian Xris Katsiroubas. In this call, for the first time, Katsiroubas also provides a name, in fact, a nom de guerre. He tells Collins it's Shedad.
Effectively, we are dealing with the largest gas installation in Algeria. It represents a huge proportion of the national...
Katsiroubas makes several calls demanding safe passage to the main facility at the other end of the plant, where other militants are holding yet more hostages. He describes to Collins what he sees down the road, a barrier placed by the military. The blockade is very easily moved. It's not like the biggest thing. It can just be moved onto the main road or something. They are still in front of us. They haven't moved. Katsiroubas wants it removed within 2 hours, or else hostages would be killed. It's the first time Katsiroubas explicitly threatens their lives. By night, little had changed. Collins decides to go home at 11 p.m. to sleep, taking his cell phone with him. In the fog of sleep, he misses Katsiroubas' latest call. But then he receives a text. Andy, it's Shedad. Important that you need to call ASAP. Collins repeatedly tries to call and finally gets through to Katsiroubas, who is worried about the Algerian army advancing. Right now, the army is firing at us. They fired at our direction, at the prisoners. The only problem is there's no ability to talk to them. The leader says that we'll talk to the military right now, because we don't want these guys shot. They're going to everyone is going to die. It's clear the military is intent on ending the standoff, and the tension builds. After another series of frantic calls, the militants decide to make a run for it. The gunmen, including Xris Katsiroubas, force the hostages into SUVs and head to the central processing facility. Katsiroubas is carrying a suicide bomb in his lap. But they never make it. The vehicle's either shot down by the military or blown up. Katsiroubas survives, last seen running towards the facility. And that's publicly where his story ends. That is, until Collins reads into the record the transcript of a voicemail that appears on his phone. The last words he would hear Xris Katsiroubas say. Andy, this is the Mujahideen calling you. Half the prisoners are dead because the Algerian army fired at 3 cars full of prisoners. You need to stop the Algerians so we can deal with this, or everybody's going to be dead. We're going to blow up the factory. The voice is unrecognizable. It sounds slurred and slow, nothing like Shedad's aggressive voice. Collins and his team listen to it repeatedly, and then suddenly realize that voice is still that of Shedad or Katsiroubas. But he now sounds labored, likely because he's badly injured. It's the last time Collins would hear from him. Katsiroubas died in that same large explosion that killed the remaining hostages and militants at the processing facility. His words and images stay behind, a reminder of their cruelty. But tragically, the most lasting traces of those 4 days are the lives he helped destroy. Al Ayed, CBC News, London.